It's time to talk some Georgia recruiting coming out of the dead period. In today's video, the focus is going to be on the offensive side of the ball, and I got UGA insider Jake Rowe riding with me for this one. But first, Dog fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We love talking dog recruiting. We're going to do it all off season, so jump on board with us. All right, let's bring on Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ. And I wanted to talk offense in this one and just keep it strictly offense. But then Dogs HQ had to break some news this morning. Elite edge Zion Grady back in Athens this weekend. Now, he was at Bama over the weekend, and it got me thinking, like, hey, maybe he's going to return to Bama because he did decommit right after Nick Saban, but he's been in contact with Kalen DeBoer. But he's going to be back in Athens this weekend, and is something cooking here? Because it seems like Zion Grady and UGA is really heating up.
You know, Georgia's got a lot of lines in the water when it comes to edge players. I mean, you know, you look at the Akinabon kid and Bryce Davis and the Gibson kid out of Warner Robins. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that they're really interested in at the edge positions. I know they like Zion Grady a lot, evidenced by the fact that they tried to get him on campuses early in this spring window for them because they were on spring break last week as they can. I do think there's some serious, there's a serious relationship here. I think Alabama's a serious threat as well. And I'm interested to see how this one goes because Grady has been on Georgia's radar for a long time. And if you really want to understand what, Chidera Uzo-Diribe, Georgia's outside linebackers coach, thinks of Zion Grady, last year when Georgia had the scavenger hunt, he was one of a handful of non 2023 guys or 2024 guys that was invited and was in town for that. And so I think that's something that kind of tells you a lot about what Georgia thinks of him. I think Georgia's going to be in this one until the very end, but you can't count out Alabama. He felt really good enough. He felt good enough about them to commit one time. Not going to surprise me if he does that again, but I do think Georgia's definitely in it.
All right, go check out Dogs HQ tomorrow. After he's on campus, you guys will probably have an update with him. More on that coming. All right, running back. We're going to go to offense now. Gerard Pringle from Tampa Armwood is visiting on Tuesday, and he's a major On3 outlier. Charles Power, director of scouting and rankings here at On3, has him ranked at number 93 overall. Next highest is 220 at 24/7. Now, I know Georgia's been talking to him. Is he becoming a priority for the Dogs?
It's tough to say, but I will say that Josh Crawford gets the running backs coach, run game coordinator job at Georgia, and all of a sudden Georgia is kind of in the mix here, and Georgia's hosting as a recruit. Different guys have different boards. It's one thing Kirby does to a large degree is he lets the position coach kind of set their board. And listen, I'm not saying he doesn't have any input. I'm sure he does, but listen, I tend to trust Charles a lot when it comes to running backs. I think he does a really good job with those guys and usually ends up kind of ahead of what's coming. I think that might be the case here. Georgia wasn't really mentioned. Now he's a guy that's going to be on campus, Tuesday, again, early in that window. The timing tells you a lot. And it tells you a little bit also about kind of the way things might be changing for the Bulldogs with Josh Crawford taking over as that running backs coach.
All right, let's talk a little UGA QB recruiting. And there's two names that keep popping up that I keep hearing when it comes to Georgia recruiting at the quarterback position, and that's Julian Lewis and Mattzers. Have they kind of emerged as maybe the top two on that board right now?
There's no doubt about it.
Okay.
It is those two at the top.
And how do you see this playing out? Does UGA land one of them? Could they potentially land them both?
Man, you don't want to speak in absolutes in this business, but Rusty Mansell and I have talked about this on our show. We've talked about it personally. We've talked about it on our board. I don't see Georgia getting past those top two options. I think Georgia's going to get Julian Lewis. They're going to end up getting Mattzers, one or the other in this class. And I think right now it's tough to make a call. I was a little bit kind of iffy on maybe Zollers because of the fact that he was dead set 100% going to make a decision, I believe, sometime in March. Well, Chad Simmons reports this morning that he might not be doing that. He's not going to be doing that anymore, that this thing's going to get pushed back a little bit. Georgia, Penn State, Missouri mentioned in that. I think there's another school involved as well. I do know this. I think if you were to get inside the minds of the Georgia coaches that are involved in his recruitment and involved in the recruitment of Juju Lewis, I think the gap between those two is minuscule. And I think the Bulldogs really love both guys. And it could be a first come type situation. It could be, one of those deals where, Georgia's able to kind of, make something happen as soon as one makes a decision. I don't know. But right now, I would lean heavily towards Georgia getting one of them.
Georgia fans, tell me, what do you guys think? Comment section below. Do you want Julian Lewis or Mattzers? I mean, you really, like Jake said, you really can't go wrong with either one, but comment section below, which one do you want? All right, let's kind of talk about how we did with the quarterback board. What about wide receiver board? Because there's two, and I know the wide receiver position this year across the country is loaded. There's so many good wide receivers. But when it comes to UGA wide receiver recruiting, I keep hearing CJ Wiley and Travis Smith. Are they near the top of the board for the Dogs?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think one of the big reasons is this a deep wide receiver class in the state of Georgia. Deep. And it's been a struggle for the Peach State for a few years now, outside of a guy or two. Well, last year they had Mike Matthews come through. Georgia gave it a good run, wasn't able to get him. They are in good shape, I feel like, with Travis Smith and CJ Wiley, and those two are going to be extremely high on the board throughout. James Coley is in as the wide receivers coach. James Coley likes big receivers. Yep. Travis Smith is a guy. Got a chance to see him at Under Armour. Had a really good day, very bouncy athlete, very big guy, really well put together. CJ Wiley was not there, but, kind of in the same mold in some ways, but maybe a little bit taller, a little thinner. You definitely get the sense that Georgia is going to be all in on those guys. And then, it'll be interesting to see who else emerges in state. Mm-hmm. There are some other players that kind of, you want to see what they do this spring. You want to see how they fare in camp this summer. To kind of see where things are going from there. But, Georgia's going to obviously recruit the position out of state as well.
All right. Well, we can't talk UGA offensive recruiting without talking about five-star offensive tackle David Sanders. And over the weekend, he was at Clemson. Now, Clemson and Matt Luke seem to be Georgia's biggest competition. And really, to be honest with you, it has seemed like Georgia was the team to beat for a long time. But right now, as it stands, and I know he's going to be back in Athens, of course, and this recruitment isn't going anywhere anytime soon, but, I mean, Georgia and Clemson kind of seem neck and neck at this point. What's your take on his recruitment?
Clemson's got a lot of momentum, man. And listen, he goes to Matt Luke because, you take a couple years off, you kind of get the batteries recharged. He's made a run. He's a really good recruiter. He's good at his job. He did a really good job at Georgia. I struggled with kind of that last class that he had at Georgia a little bit, but overall coached it well, recruited it well. One thing I'll say about David Sanders, I got to know him a little bit last year, spoke with his family. Clemson has a unique way of doing things. I don't think anybody would debate that. They do things their own way. They have their own flavor of Kool-Aid. Yep. And I honestly think that family dynamic is going to be appealing to the Sanders family and the way Clemson does things. Now, with that said, he's going to be on Georgia's campus, or is supposed to be on Georgia's campus, and we expect him to be within the next week. And Georgia has built a long-standing relationship there. It's kind of funny. And listen, I don't get into this mud tossing with coaches or anything like that. That's just foolish. But I mentioned that final class that Matt Luke recruited at Georgia. That one, Ernest Green was obviously the guy in that class. Well, you ended up with the Hood kid from Tennessee having to transfer out to Nebraska. You end up with Ali Uba transferring out. You ended up with Griffin Scroggs not working out. And the fact that class worked out the way it did created a situation where Georgia had to go stack a big class in 2024 with, Easley and Uini and Daniel Calhoun. They signed 7 offensive linemen. You kind of get the feeling that, or you kind of makes you wonder, I mean, is Matt Luke going to be on the good side of kind of having that class work out the way it did, because Georgia took a massive class, and now maybe that's something that David Sanders has to keep an eye on. So I do think Georgia's going to be in this one throughout. It's one of those things that just kind of ends up happening in recruiting sometimes. But, it does not surprise me that Matt Luke has Clemson in the mix for David Sanders. He's a great recruiter. But listen, I definitely think Georgia's very, very much in the mix here. And This is probably going to come down to official visits.
Yeah, and this is a huge week for dogs recruiting. A lot of visitors will be hitting campus on Tuesday, but even more coming towards the end of the week and into the weekend. Dogs HQ, you guys do an unbelievable job of covering all things spring practice, recruiting, all things UGA. Jake Rowe, appreciate you stopping by on the Inside Scoop today.
You got it, man.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed that, go check out the hundreds of videos that we have on this channel, and also do me a favor, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel.